Today, April the 29th, 1971, we have Mr. Henry Whitlow, Assistant Director of Federal Projects for Tulsa Public Schools. Your interviewer is James Katigan with the Tulsa County Historical Society and the Oklahoma Living Legends, Oklahoma City. Mr. Whitlow, let's begin this interview by asking you something about your background.
To start it off with, I am what I almost would call a native Tulsan, only I was born in Van Buren, Arkansas in 1909 and moved to Tulsa with my family when I was 5 years old. So therefore, I call myself a native Tulsan because all my schooling, public schooling, was done in Tulsa. And I've lived here ever since that time. I've been with the Tulsa school system since 1933 as an elementary teacher, as a junior high school principal, and 17 years as a senior high school principal. I did my undergraduate work at Lincoln University in Chester County, Pennsylvania, which I received a BA degree and later earned a master's degree at Northwestern University at Evanston, Illinois. I've done postgraduate work at Oklahoma University and Colorado University. I have, during this time in Tulsa, participated in many civic and church affairs. I have been a member of Vernon AME Church since my return from college in 1932 and served as a member of the Board of Trustees of the church for 27 years. I've been chairman of the Religious Education Board, chairman of the Building Commission, and have taught a women's Bible class in the church since 1949. In my past experiences here in Tulsa, I might say that of all my civic work, I think the most good that I've possibly accomplished, or I tried to accomplish, was my several years of membership on the National Conference of Christians and Jews Board of Directors. Out of that grew one of the experiences, I think, that will go down in the history of Tulsa, and it's dealing with the problems of desegregation of the community as a whole. In that, out of the NCCJ board, 5 of the members of the board resigned off that board and was appointed by the mayor to Oklahoma's first Community Relations Commission that was created by ordinance by the city of Tulsa. In working with this board, or this commission, many things were accomplished for the good of Tulsa, in that a public accommodation ordinance was passed by the city and enforceable by the city commissioner and the commission and the law department of the city. This cleared many racial conflicts in Tulsa, and this commission also has had passed a fair housing ordinance by the city, as well as the city has inserted in its contracts the matter of any employer, any contractor doing business with the city has to have in his contract that he will employ people with no discrimination according to race, creed, or color. That is in operation at the present time. The other community service in which I am very proud of is my service with the Boy Scouts, which I have been serving as a volunteer worker in Tulsa since 1927. In 1940, I was awarded the Silver Beaver Award, which is the award of the National Office of Boy Scouting for distinguished service to boyhood. Of this I am very proud to have merited. In the educational field, I was president of the Oklahoma Association of Negro Teachers when it was a separate organization. And now that integration has come about, it is one association which is known as the Oklahoma Educational Association. I have served as a member of the board of directors of the Oklahoma Educational Association. I have been past president of the Secondary Principals Association of Oklahoma, the Governor's Advisory Committee on Rehabilitation Facilities for the state, the Morton Hospital Board, a member of the Library Committee of Thomas Gilcrease Institute of American History and Art, Incorporated, and for several years a member of the Board of Directors, as I said, of the Tulsa chapter of the National Council of Christian Jews. I've also served on the Executive Committee of the Tulsa Council of Social Agencies, the Oklahoma Health and Welfare Association Board, the Advisory Board of the Tulsa County Welfare Unit, and was a member of the original Tulsa Office of Equal Opportunity Task Force Board, the Tulsa Child Guidance Clinic Board of Directors for 2 6-year terms, and a member of the Tulsa Community Chess Board of Directors as a member, and also served as a member of its Budget Screening Committee for 5 years.
By the way, Mr. Whitlow, can you think of some extraordinary experience you had while serving the Boy Scouts?
First, I think I'd better go back to the beginning of scouting in Tulsa for the Negro Scouts. Tulsa had scouting but did not have any Negroes in scouting back in 1927, and a group of men were asked to take a training course in scouting. They were supposed to be 18 years or older, but I was a senior in high school and over 6 foot tall, at least 6 foot tall, so they asked me would I join the course, one of my history teachers, and we took a training course to start Boy Scouting in Tulsa for Negro boys. Then I was made an assistant scoutmaster of one of the first 5 troops organized in Tulsa. Even though I was too young to be a scoutmaster. I thought that was interesting in itself. But then I think the most interesting thing about it, after we had the troops organized, we didn't have any place to carry them camping, which is part of scouting. The out in scouting is you go camping. And Robert McBurney, an old citizen here in Tulsa, allowed us to carry these Negro boys out to his ranch on the top of a mountain out from Skytoot. It was quite an experience, first camping for the men and the boys, But the one thing that I think was very, very funny that happened, we had a set of twins, identical twins, on this camping trip, and at night, in order to have something to do, we'd have boxing matches. And these twins it was dark, nothing but the campfire, so these twins one of them would put on the gloves, and then when the round was over, he'd slink back in the dark and change gloves with his twin brother, and they fought one boy, two of them, for 5 rounds before anybody discovered what was happening. That was one of the incidents I've always remember in the early scouting. However, in camping, we remained as segregated camping facilities as well as participation until, I tell you what we used to do. We used to go down on Spring Creek in Wagner County and pitch our old Army tents, and when it would rain, they would split, and we'd have to sew tents the next day because of the canvas tightening up. Besides that, we'd have to dig a hole in the side of the wall bank of the creek, and then chlorinate our water for drinking, and had an old Army stove that we buried in the ground that did our cooking on. This was real roughing scouting over against what we have today, and the boys today I don't think could take that kind of scouting because they really had to rough it. However, since before school integration, scouting here in Tulsa was integrated in that the boys now attend camp with every scout in all the scout facilities, which has shown a lot of progress and a part of Tulsa scouting. And it was during the time that we had segregated scouting that I, as commissioner of what was known as District 611, which was also known as the Negro Scout area, we had 10 troops in which I worked as a district commissioner, and because of my work in organizing these 10 troops and keeping them going, I received the Civil Beaver Award in 1940 for distinguished service to boyhood. In my many years working with scouting, after I had reached the age of what they call too old to go out with the boys and the like, although I know a scoutmaster who has worked with scouting all these years. He's been a scoutmaster for 40 years and is still active in scouting, plus the fact that he carries his boys to camp every year. But I was moved out of the active scouting and placed on the executive board of the Indian Nations Council of the Boy Scouts of America, which I've served on now for 10 years. One of my other civic belongings is to belong to the North Tulsa Rotary Club. It is alleged that I was the first Negro member of Rotary south of St. Louis. This in itself may not be a distinction, but it did happen. At the present time, after 5 years as a member of this particular Rotary Club, I am president of this club. Tulsa has expanded its membership now, where 2 clubs have Negro members, 3 in the particular club in which I belong to. In my educational field, I have participated in the national and the state, the regional, as well as local organizations of education. I am a member of the National Association of Secondary School Principals and have participated in their national conventions on panels and discussion leaders. I presently am a member of the six-man National Curriculum Committee of the National Association of Secondary Principals. I am a life member of the National Educational Association and am the immediate past president of the Oklahoma Secondary School Principals Association, after having been president of the Tulsa Secondary Principals Group. I've also served as an active participant on committees for the North Central Association of Colleges and Secondary Schools, having spoken to their annual meeting 3 times in Chicago to the total group. As a member of the Oklahoma Education Association Legislative Commission, I have served 6 years on that term, just ending in July 1970. I've also served on the St. John's Hospital Nursing School Council, a member of the board of the Friends of the Library of Tulsa, a member of the advisory board of the Southwest Center of the Human Relations Studies of Oklahoma University, and a member of their Visitors Board for the community of Oklahoma University for the past 3 years. I also have served for the YMCA as a board of director member of the Hudson branch of the YMCA and a member of its public affairs committee. I am at this present time, and have been since 1949, president of the Tulsa Negro Teachers Credit Union, which began as a separate organization in 1938 because Negro teachers could not borrow from the white credit union. So the Tulsa Negro Teachers Credit Union was organized, and I've served as its president since 1949. I've also, as I mentioned before, been as a member of the Tulsa Community Relations Commission, but I think also I should say, as being its second chairman since it was organized, I served 3 years as the chairman of the Tulsa Community Relations Commission, and after 7 years' service on in that organization, I resigned to devote more work to my school, in which I was getting paid to do, and I was doing more work for the community than I was with my school, so I resigned that position as well as many of my other affiliations in order to give more time to my professional work. I have this distinction also of being listed in Who's Who in the South and Southwest. I am married and have been married now for 34 years, and I have one son who is Henry C. Whitlow III, a graduate metallurgical engineer.
Mr. Whitlow, will you describe for us your experiences you have had with integration in the schools in Oklahoma and the city of Tulsa?
Yes, I'd be glad to. In that I was involved in the integration of schools from the very beginning after the Supreme Court decision of 1954. Oklahoma did not desegregate or integrated schools to 1955, the schools themselves. But being on the executive committee of the Oklahoma Association of Negro Teachers, which was a separate organization, I was appointed as chairman of the committee to try to work out desegregation and integration, not only of the students but of the teachers, in which we as an organization were concerned about. Integration took place in the state in the fall of 1954 in a few small schools. But at the same time, the State Department of Education said that, and the governor of Oklahoma at that time said Oklahoma would follow the court order and comply. But they said that it would not have to take place until 1955. And this was done by many of the schools of the state in the fall of 1955. But in the process, what happened was that they closed the Negro schools and dismissed the Negro teachers, and therefore there was a loss of job for many Negro teachers in the state. And as chairman of this committee, it was my job and the committee's job to talk to various school boards and superintendents to try to retain the jobs of these teachers. In the first 2 years of integration in Oklahoma, over 400 Negro teachers lost their jobs, and it has continued down to almost the present time that the Negro teacher has lost his job. But on the other hand, many of them found jobs outside of the state. Those that were not too old to leave the state or near retirement, many of them left the state. Others went into the larger school systems in the all-Negro schools and received jobs. But in spite of the threat of lawsuit over these teachers, many of them lost their jobs, and there were 92 high schools in Oklahoma, all black high schools, in 1954 and 55. But today we only have 4 predominantly black high schools with black principals. This, I think, is one of the things that will go down in history as to how Oklahoma complied, even though they were among the first southern or southwestern states to comply without incident to desegregation of schools, which I think can be laid to the attitude of the governor of the state as well as the State Department of Education.
Mr. Whitlow, what improvements or comment would you have to make about improvements that has been made as concerning the pupils since integration of the schools?
Well, in the early days of integration, some schools had no problems at all so far as students getting along, because there were just in most of the schools a few Negro students. But those Negro students did not participate in anything unless it was the band or the chorus or the athletic programs. I think just as in the early days of national integration of athletes in professional sports, the participation in athletics by the Negro child gave him some feeling of success, as well as he was recognized by the total school and the community. He created a different image of the Negro child because of this, and he was one of the heroes of the school and not just of the team. This in itself built up an image of the Negro child. I don't know whether I should tell this or not, but I think I will, to show you what I mean, to illustrate the point. There was a football game going on for a state championship between a predominantly black high school, in the small high school classes, and there was a fight between a Negro boy on one team and a Negro boy on the other team, and one of the fans of the school, which was from Little Dixie, uh, jumped up in the stands and hollered and said, "Did you see that nigger hit our colored boy?" This itself, I think, illustrates the uh, thinking of the fans and the community when it came to the matter of acceptance of the Negro students. Of course, there has been much progress made in other areas besides of the athletics and the band and the chorus. For now, the Negro students in schools over the state have been elected to the student council. They have been elected to the class officers. They have participated in the honor societies, in the plays, and practically every area of activity of the schools. And I think you'll find this true in most of Oklahoma at this time. So I think the relationship of students because has improved greatly because most of the schools that I'm talking about, the Negro child is in minority, and when he can succeed in the areas of being elected or selected by the student bodies of those schools, it shows that the relationship among these students have been improved greatly.
Mr. Whitlow, since you have worked with human relations, what improvements have you noticed or has taken place in the human relations of the state of Oklahoma and the city of Tulsa?
Well, as you said, I have worked with this for quite some time, and I feel that Oklahoma, just as in the schools, has developed an attitude of everybody trying to treat everybody alike, give everybody an opportunity. And the citizens of the various towns and small communities even in Oklahoma have organized committees to work at this. Therefore, we have had less conflict, I think, in Oklahoma than most states because that the people in Oklahoma were willing to change and willing to live together in peace. Only by their willingness to do this uh, have we been spared, in my opinion, the conflicts that have arisen in other states of the Union and other cities of the Union. Especially here in Tulsa, I think we have been very fortunate in that we've had very few confrontations racially because Tulsa has been willing to give and change certain practices that were prevalent in the city before it became a national effort to have human relations passed or practiced in the cities and towns of our nation. Tulsa and Oklahoma can be proud of their progress in this area.
Mr. Whitlow, since you have such a great part in working with the schools, would you predict that we are going to go on with in a bright future that we are now experiencing with our school?
Well, I'd like to answer that in this way. Right now, there are conflicts in the schools over the nation, but as I said, Oklahoma doesn't have as many as these as others, and I do think that in this time period in which we're living now, it is a constant conflict between the so-called establishment or anybody that would tell anybody what to do. Uh, but this too, I think, will pass, and with the passing of this, as every generation has had its conflicts in some manner, but the mass conflict we're having between authority and the youth of today, this too will pass, and I look for this experience of our youth during this time to pass, and that schools will be more meaningful to students in the future than the students now, where we're living in an age of unrest, because they will have realized what school is really all about, because they've had to look at the problem realistically with the closing of schools and with the conflict in schools, and they are anxious now, especially here in Tulsa, do I feel, that they are very anxious to get an education and not have the unrest within the school building itself.
From the Tulsa County Historical Society at the beautiful Tulsa County Library in the city of Tulsa, we have had a pleasant interview with Mr. Henry Whitlow, Assistant Director of Federal Projects for the Tulsa Public Schools. Your interviewer has been James Katigan for the Oklahoma Living Legends.